See that orange book right there? Can you grab that? Pass it to me. Thank you. And your customer service right now. Nice.
No, no, I mean, there's the booklet. Hey, I'll come up with my coffee in order. Totally forgot about it.
So good evening, everybody. Welcome back to McNally Jackson. For those of you joining us for the first time, where have you been? It's nice to see you. We have a really special event tonight, as most of you probably know. Before I get started, I do like to mention McNally Jackson has started a fund. All of the monies go directly to families that are in the process of deportation. If you are interested in checking it out, you may do so on our website. And now on to the book. In this highly anticipated new novel about a young Turkish-American woman starting college at Harvard in the 90s, Elif Batuman chases the process of finding an identity in the modern world. Quote, "The Idiot is a hilariously mundane immersion into a world that has never before received the 19th century novel treatment," says Miranda July. Elif Batuman has been a staff writer at The New Yorker since 2010. Her first book, The Possessed, was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. After she reads, she will be joined in conversation tonight by Michael Cunningham, author of 7 novels, including the Pulitzer Prize-winning The Hours, and most recently The Snow Queen, and a collection of short stories, A Wild Swan. And in the present moment, please make Elif feel very welcome.
Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you all for coming here tonight and for being here and not in the huge line at the Supreme shoe store. Where I think they must have something really good going on. And I just came here from Denver and Boston and Washington, and now that I look at this room full of people, I was feeling a little bit tired, but I see so many people I love so dearly, and it means so much to me to see you all here, and I really feel like I'm home. I haven't had a stable home for a long time, so this means a lot to me. Thank you. I'm going to read a little bit from The Idiot, which is, I was surprised too that the novel that I wrote was about an 18-year-old in 1995, but some of you know I was writing a different novel, but I ended up writing this one, so that's what I'm going to read from, and then talk and do questions. Okay. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the beginning. I didn't know what email was until I got to college. I had heard of email and knew that in some sense I would have it. "You'll be so fancy," said my mother's sister, who had married a computer scientist, "sending your emails." She emphasized the E and paused for mail. That summer, I heard email mentioned with increasing frequency. "Things are changing so fast," my father said. "Today at work, I surfed the World Wide Web. 1 second, I was in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. 1 second later, I was in Anıtkabir. Anıtkabir, Atatürk's mausoleum, was located in Ankara. I had no idea what my father was talking about, but I knew there was no meaningful sense in which he had been in Ankara that day, so I didn't really pay attention. On the first day of college, I stood in line behind a folding table and eventually received an email address and temporary password. The address had my last name in it, Karada, but all lowercase, and without the Turkish soft G, which was silent. From an early age, I had understood that a silent G was funny. The G is silent, I would say in a weary voice, and it was always hilarious. I didn't understand how the email address was an address, or what it was short for. What do we do with this? Hang ourselves? I asked, holding up the Ethernet cable. Plug it into the wall, said the girl behind the table. Insofar as I had any idea about it at all, I had imagined that email would resemble faxing and would involve a printer. But there was no printer. There was another world. You could access it from certain computers, which were scattered throughout the ordinary landscape, and looked no different from regular computers. Always there, unchanged, in a configuration nobody else could see, was a glowing list of messages from all the people you knew, and from people you didn't know, all in the same letters, like the universal handwriting of thought or of the world. Some messages were formally epistolary, with dear and sincerely. Others, holographic, all in lowercase, with missing punctuation, like they were being beamed straight from people's brains. And each message contained the one that had come before, so your own words came back to you. All the words you threw out, they came back. It was like the story of your relations with others, the story of the intersection of your life with other lives, was constantly being recorded and updated, and you could check it at any time. My roommate Hannah bought a refrigerator for the common room. She said I could use it if I bought something for the room too, like a poster. I asked what kind of poster she had in mind. Psychedelic, she said. I didn't know what a psychedelic poster was, so she showed me her psychedelic notebook. It had a fluorescent tie-dyed spiral with purple lizards walking around the spiral and disappearing into the center. What if they don't have that? I asked. Then a photograph of Albert Einstein, she said decisively, as if it were the obvious next choice. Albert Einstein? Yeah, one of those black and white pictures. You know, Einstein. The campus bookstore turned out to have a huge selection of Albert Einstein posters. There was Einstein at a blackboard, Einstein in a car, Einstein sticking out his tongue, Einstein smoking a pipe. I didn't totally understand why we had to have an image of Einstein on our wall, but it was better than buying my own refrigerator. The poster I got was no better or worse than the other Einstein posters in any way that I could see, but Hannah seemed to dislike it. She said. I think it'll look good there. She pointed to the space over my bookshelf. But then you can't see it. That's okay, goes best there. From that day on, everyone who happened by our room, neighbors wanting to borrow stuff, residential computer staff, student council candidates, all kinds of people to whom my small enthusiasm should have been a source of little or no concern, went out of their way to disabuse me of my great admiration for Albert Einstein. Einstein had invented the atomic bomb, abused dogs, neglected his children. There were many greater geniuses than Einstein, said a Bulgarian freshman who had stopped by to borrow my copy of Dostoevsky's The Double. Alfred Nobel hated mathematics and didn't give the Nobel Prize to any mathematicians. There were many who were more deserving. Oh, I handed him the book. Well, see you around. Thanks, he said, glaring at the poster. This is the man who beats his wife, forces her to solve his mathematical problems, to do the dirty work, and he denies her credit. And you put his picture on your wall. Listen, leave me out of this, I said. It's not really my poster. It's a complicated situation. He wasn't listening. Einstein in this country is synonymous with genius, while many greater geniuses aren't famous at all. Why is this, I'm asking you? I sighed. Maybe it's because he's really the best and even jealous mudslingers can't hide his star quality, I said. Nietzsche would say that such a great genius is entitled to beat his wife. That shut him up. After he left, I thought about taking down the poster. I wanted to be a courageous person, uncowed by other people's dumb opinions. But what was the dumb opinion? Thinking Einstein was so great? or thinking he was the worst. In the end, I left the poster up. When it came time to choose classes, everyone said it was of utmost importance to apply to freshman seminars, because otherwise it could be years before you had a chance to work with senior faculty. I applied to 3 literature seminars and got called in for 1 interview. I reported to the top floor of a cold white building, where I shivered for 20 minutes on a leather sofa under a skylight, wondering if I was in the right place. There were some strange newspapers on the coffee table. That was the first time I saw the Times Literary Supplement. I couldn't understand anything in the Times Literary Supplement. A door opened and the professor called me in. He extended his hand, an enormous hand on an incredibly skinny, pale wrist, further dwarfed by a gigantic overcoat. "I don't think I should shake your hand," I said. "I have this cold." I skipped the part where they get the cold. Hannah gets it too. Then I had a violent fit of sneezing. The professor looked startled but recovered quickly. "Gesundheit," he said urbanely. "I'm sorry you aren't feeling well. These first days of college can be rough on the immune system." "So I'm learning," I said. "Well, that's what it's all about," he said. "Learning." Ha ha. Ha ha, I said. "Well, let's get down to business. From your application, you seem to be very creative. I enjoyed your creative application essay. My only concern is that you realize the seminar is an academic class, not a creative class." "Right," I said, nodding energetically, and trying to determine whether any of the rectangles in my peripheral vision was a box of tissues. Unfortunately, they were all books. The professor was talking about the differences between creative and academic writing. I kept nodding. I was thinking about the structural equivalences between a tissue box and a book. Both consisted of slips of white paper in a cardboard case. Yet, and this was ironic, there was very little functional equivalence, especially if the book wasn't yours. These were the kinds of things I thought about all the time, even though they were neither pleasant nor useful. I had no idea what you were supposed to be thinking about. "Do you think," the professor was saying, "that you could spend 2 hours reading the same passage, the same sentence, even the same word? Do you think you might find it tedious or boring?" Because my ability to spend hours staring at a single word had rarely been encouraged in the past, I pretended to have to think it over. "No," I said, finally. The professor nodded, frowning thoughtfully and narrowing his eyes. I understood, with a sinking feeling, that I was supposed to keep talking. "I like words," I elaborated. "They don't bore me at all." Then I sneezed 5 times. I didn't get in. I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much.
Michael, thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you. We've met. Full disclosure, we're friends. Which means
It means I'm a very lucky person.
we're both very lucky people, and I get to ask you all those questions that I would never ask like at dinner. We just talk about our hair and shit.
Oh
right?
yeah, we talk so much about our hair.
Wow.
I'm hoping that we'll touch on that a little bit.
We can do anything you want.
Thank you.
This is your
It's my party, right?
It's your party. You can cry if you want to, and you can talk about your hair. You want to tell the hair story? Maybe we'll get to it.
Well, yeah, let's
see.
we have to leave something to climb up to.
Let's see if it feels appropriate. You know, of course, we didn't rehearse for this, but we did talk about it a little bit. And it turns out each of us, you have a quote from Tolstoy, and I
Yeah.
have one from Forster that essentially explains why this conversation is absurd and pointless. Would you do the Tolstoy?
Oh yeah, Tolstoy had this, after he wrote Anna Karenina, he had this friend Strakov who was a critic, and Strakov wrote him this letter with his interpretation of Anna Karenina, and he was like really excited about telling it to Tolstoy, and he was like, so is it right or is it not right? And then Tolstoy wrote, and he was like, you know, everything that you said is right, but it's not everything. It's not everything that I wanted to say in my book. If I were to try to say in words what I said in my book, I would now have to write the same exact book in the same words. That's what is so great about Tolstoy, is that he has word rep that he just doesn't
I
cut out.
know, he's so
Very elegant.
Tolstoy. Yeah. The Forster spin is, you know, what is your book about? Darling,
Yeah.
if I could tell you what the book was about, I wouldn't have written the goddamn book. Well,
It's a little shorter and pithy.
yeah. So what's your book about? No, we'll skip that, okay? We'll skip
Okay.
what's your book about.
All right.
Read the book. The book explains the book.
Does.
The book is what the book is about.
And for better and for worse.
Yeah,
It's not about
yeah.
anything that it's not.
Yeah.
That it's not.
You know, I also know that Elif has just finished, this is the last leg of a book tour, and I know very well that when you've been on a book tour and you have answered the same questions over and over again, you begin to understand that you're not really a person at all, you're just a system of practiced gestures. So, all I can say to that is, if I ask a question that you've already answered, just shake your head.
Wait,
And
but
we'll go on
those
to
are the
something
questions
else.
I'm looking forward to, because
Oh.
I know the answers.
Well, then what's one of your favorites?
Oh. I can't say that.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
Alright.
I'm here to do my job. You're here to do your job. This is actually kind of a big one, but it actually does concern me. I'm not going to ask you any faux
Okay.
faux questions. What is fiction for? Why do we write novels?
Yeah.
No one asks us to. Many other forms of writing, I think, sort of come with their own purposes clearly attached. What is fiction for? Who is it for? Why do we want to do it?
That's a wonderful question, and I always wanted to write novels since I was very small, since before I really knew what novels were. So it could just be an elaborate kind of con game where like I thought it was a good, because sometimes I feel like I'm on a mission now that like a baby sent me on, because I made that decision not really knowing, and now I'm still just doing it. But I always like to read novels. I worked for a long time as a nonfiction writer. My first book is nonfiction. And even while I was basically working as a foreign correspondent, I was or a somewhat correspondent. I was in Turkey for 3 years writing reported nonfiction that was fact checked. But still at night, all I wanted to read was novels, and they just seemed more true to me, even though they weren't checked and weren't checkable. And I guess to me, I've had some conversations. So when I first started writing, I thought that I would be a fiction writer, and then I started submitting things for publication in sort of my mid to late 20s, and when I described the things that I wanted to write, I was told by very smart and very good editors that I was wrong, and that actually what I was writing were essays. And I would describe the piece that I wanted to write, and I would be told, that I wanted to write about a conference at Stanford about the work of Isaac Babel, and it would be about Babel's work, and it would be about my problems as a graduate student, and the intrigues with the family and the faculty and all of that. And I was told, no, that's what essays do. Essays are about real books and real people and the way they interact, and essays have literary criticism in them, and fiction doesn't. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I wrote my first piece as an essay, and then I just became a nonfiction writer for 10 years, just sort of like that. And to me, what it means to go back to fiction, or to start fiction for the first time, depending on how one thinks of it. Actually, this book is based on a book that I wrote before I started writing nonfiction. So when I was in my early 20s, when I was still at graduate school. And I always thought about it as fiction, and the way I think about it is you write things that are nonfiction, and that you're saying that these are things that are true, they're a small part of a larger reality. The people in them aren't characters, they're real people who have, whose representation in your work has to be in some way continuous or coherent, or at least in conversation with who they are in the rest of the annals of the world and of other people's experiences. And you're saying that what you're writing about has some claim to be known because of the fact that it happened. And the way I feel about fiction is, I personally don't agree, or the way that books are sold now in, I think, the whole English-speaking world, the first kind of fork in the road of how books are classified is fiction and nonfiction. And to me, that isn't the most obvious one. I think I don't know what I would say, like subjective and objective or something, something else.
Yeah, short or long,
something else.
Top books versus bottom
books. They're red, or they're warm colored covers, or
No, I
cold
agree
colored
completely.
covers.
Yeah.
But then I feel like since it's so clear what nonfiction is, and other languages don't have it, like in Russian you have like belletristic writing and journalistic writing, and that's kind of course, but it's different. So, but with nonfiction being so clear what it is, I feel like people think that, fiction, nonfiction has a stamp on it that says everything in this is true. Fiction, therefore, has a stamp on it that says nothing in this is true. And then, as you know, there's that absurd disclaimer that's on the copyright page that any relationship between this and reality is a coincidence, which is completely crazy, because where did we, what we landed from Mars? Like, where are we supposed to have invented this stuff from? So my feeling is that, like the stamp that I imagine on a novel like The Idiot, which is based on my own, definitely my own sphere of my own little small corner of like human experience for sure. I think of the stamp on that saying, I'm not making a truth claim, that's not what this is about. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. What matters is that I'm telling a story, and sit back and enjoy the story. If you don't enjoy it, there's absolutely no reason for you to read it, because it's not like, if you don't read something that I write about Turkey, then maybe I can be like, oh, you don't care about what's happening in Turkey. But if you don't want to read a novel, you don't have to read it. That's one of the great things about novels.
They're optional.
They're optional. Yeah.
Some of them are big, some of them are small, some of them are subjective, some of them are objective, but they're always optional.
Yeah, maybe that's the
Love
right.
that.
Yeah, that's the right definition.
Yeah. It's the optional literary form.
Yeah, and therefore the most fun.
Yeah. Well, and I also feel, I find that working with very real but essentially invented characters, you can go anywhere. Like, I know Anna Karenina better than I know most of my friends.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Because there's no barriers. I don't know about you, but I find that a favorite question, and one that I always feel a little is how much of this is autobiographical?
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to answer that question, but could you talk about being asked that question?
Oh yeah, it's
You know what I mean?
It's a riot. No, I know.
Why do you want to know?
People
Why does that
love
matter
that
to
question.
you? It's the first question you hear most of the time.
I understand.
Not here, not from this, not from this
not
audience.
from this audience. But I understand that question, because as a reader, I often want to know, and I think it's a very natural question for a reader to have. Like with Isaac Babin, I would be really happy to know from his childhood stories which of those things actually happened and which ones didn't. But I don't really feel that curiosity on my part has to be accommodated by the genre, because if he had to call everything that, so multiple really smart people have said to me, oh, your book is about a Turkish American who was a freshman at Harvard in 1995, and you're a Turkish American who was a freshman at Harvard in 1995, so why didn't you call this a memoir? And to me, that question, it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't really make sense, because if you were forced to label everything that was based on real experiences as memoir, just the body of literature would be so, Proust, what would you do with Proust? And Babin maybe wouldn't have written those stories, because there's a whole ton of reasons, political or personal or artistic, or a matter of achieving the right distance from the person who you're writing about, because it's very different to write about someone who's similar to you, who you think of as fictional, and someone who you think of as a representation of you, who you're accountable and checkable for. So I think it's a very natural question to have, but it's not a question that I feel that I have to answer.
I think we can announce now that we have permission from McNally Jackson to collectively go upstairs and entirely rearrange the shelves.
Oh, sweet, yeah.
According
could be
to
like
the
a
category,
group-
the
it
new
could be a group.
categories we agree on, right?
Yeah, okay, let's hash that.
This is something I always want to know about from any other novelist, but I'm always sort of embarrassed to ask unless it's my job to ask.
Right.
The process, and believe me, I don't mean by hand or on a computer, that's also kind of a popular one. Like, can you talk about how the novel arrived and how you got through it, and did you reach points of despair? And how could you not? I'm just assuming that every novelist reaches a point
I'm
of
in one
despair.
right now.
We're in one right now. Yeah. We're gonna talk about our hair very soon.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, it's sometimes I sit in a bookstore and look around and think in genuine astonishment, all these people finish their books. Whatever the
And
books
how they
actually
tortured
are.
their friends. There's like a whole invisible body of just like tortured friends of
Yeah,
theirs.
right. Hovering around the shelf. Yeah. We should just talk a little bit about
Yeah.
getting this fucking done.
Yeah. Well, getting it fucking done took like 20 years. So the despair period for me lasted from, so I always wanted to write novels, and then I noticed when I was finishing with college that like I wasn't very good at it, and for some reason, I think because my mother brought me up to have a great deal of confidence in myself, it didn't bother me that I wasn't good at it. I just assumed that later I was going to get good at it, and it was just a matter of kind of waiting. So I enrolled in graduate school when I found out they pay you to read novels. So I thought I could maybe write novels on the side. That turned out not to work. So I took a year off. I wrote this book that it was about, some experiences that I had in college, and, that now, actually, I don't even remember how much of it, because the book has sort of replaced my real memories with, like, book memories, so I don't even know what's, like, real, but whatever. So I wrote it, and I just sat there like a crazy person. Also living this really, like, domestic life where I lived with my college boyfriend, and I cooked every day, and I would go shopping, and I thought, this is what being an adult is. I'm done. This is, like, I was 23, and I was like, I'm finished. Whereas now I know my frontal lobes were, like, probably, there were, like, 3 inches between. They were, like, nowhere near fused. And so I wrote this book about my experiences as being 18 and 19, and the manuscript was full of these, asides that were like, when we're young we're so foolish, and then when we're older we understand, written from the wisdom of a 23-year-old with 1 year of graduate school. So I had a critical vocabulary that I would like deploy at certain moments. So anyway, then I more than a year went by, and I broke my elbow, and I didn't have health insurance. And then Stanford called, and they were like, well, do you want to come back to graduate school? And I was like, I'd love to come back to graduate school. So I went back, I had great health insurance, I got really into grad school. I wrote a whole book about it called The Possessed, which you can read, and it's all about how you can get really obsessed with Russian novels. And then I came back to this book sort of by accident. Actually, when we were at Santa Maddalena, when we were at this fellowship in Italy together, I was trying to work on a different novel, and I found myself having this annoying behavior that I've often deplored in other people's novels, where they'll tell the story and then they'll say, well, if you really want to know where it started here, and then they go to some earlier point, and you're like, well, why didn't you just start there? But I kept doing that, every 2 weeks I would start earlier, and then at some point I was writing about what this woman who was supposed to be 35 years old, what happened to her in college. And I have a very mean voice in my head, so the mean voice was like, why don't you just go back to the birth canal while you're at it? And then I was time is moving in a linear fashion, and the book is going in the opposite fashion, and the deadline is going this way, and it was and then I thought, okay, so as a time-saving device, I'm just going to look up that old novel that I wrote when I still had some tenuous connection to the human condition, and still remembered some things about the world when I was 23. And then I found this this manuscript, and then editing it was actually kind of delightful. So I think I've cracked the secret, which is you just have to wait for 20 years, and then it becomes very easy. You see all the things that you did wrong. The person becomes very distant and sort of more fictional than they ever were, and more. Also, this was a delightful bonus that I got. When I wrote it, it was about like life, and then when I returned to it, it was a historical novel. And I accomplished that just by sitting there. Like it had like all the stuff with email. I was like, oh, this is great. Like it really has the flavor of like the mid-90s. So then I got to like play with that. So, but yeah, usually it's a misery, and the first time around it was a misery.
We should probably talk to the audience in a minute, but I have one. Okay, this is the smarty pants question. This is the one about the acumen of am I asking the question?
Yeah.
Because you know, this is not only
Which is
about
high level of acumen.
Yeah.
It's a tough question.
Hi. I'm not going to ask you about being Turkish American.
Okay.
But I was aware, as I read the book, that it's all about what I will call strangeness. That every condition, every situation involves being a stranger in a strange land, whether it's physically going to Hungary or Harvard or venturing for the first time into the world of love, where you have never been before. Could you talk a little about that?
Yeah, I mean, so the Russian formalists say that the definition of a work of art is that it defamiliarizes, so it takes what we all kind of just don't even notice and don't register anymore as being real and makes us re-experience it with, I believe, freshness and horror is the phrase. So,
Good.
it's good, right? They're good.
Really good.
So I was thinking about, as I was kind of revising this book, I was thinking about the Bildungsroman and why that's such an appealing form, and I think it's for the really simple reason that you want to show how we all forget. We become very adept with these certain conventions, linguistic conventions and social conventions, and we don't notice even what we're saying to each other anymore. And what you want to do as a novelist is to defamiliarize, to make all of those things seem strange again. So a very helpful device is to have someone who's very young and doesn't know about them, or someone who's going to a foreigner, or so all of those things can be seen as metaphors for defamiliarizing. Although on the other hand, if you turn that around, defamiliarizing can be a metaphor for the situation of all writers, because I don't know a single writer who didn't grow up in a kind of isolated, outsiderly way, reading a lot of books, because otherwise why would you want to be a writer? It wouldn't occur to you. So I don't know actually which direction but I would actually be interested to know what you did.
I don't know.
Yeah.
No. I think I was reminded by that leitmotif in this book.
Yeah.
That, yeah. Every novel I've ever loved is essentially about being a stranger in a strange
for sure.
land, from Anna Karenina on up and down. That you could.
It's going off the map, right? Like she has the whole map of her life on Karenina, and then she goes off it, and everything is just like all freshness and horror.
Yeah. You could give almost any novel any I hope you like this. It's about
Losing your way.
losing your way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Let's talk to the lovely people. I just want to, there is a killer line on literally every page, and I wrote down a bunch of them. And just for my own pleasure and for the pleasure of those here, I just want to read it, because we can't talk about what the novel's about, but we can talk about the way the novel is written just briefly. Zoltan, whose pallor, small head, and straight black hair made him resemble an Edward Gorey drawing, stared at the floor. I mechanically ate all the pretzel sticks Margaret had set out, as if it was a job someone had given me. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
There's a billion of
That's
them.
like writing a novel, right? It's a job that nobody asked you to do, but you feel like you have to do it.
True. Shall we please, thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
Anybody
let's
want to,
talk.
what do you want to talk about? Do we have any talk about, yeah, please.
Hearing you talk about going back to the manuscript of the first novel you'd written and rediscovering it and being like estranged from it from yourself, writing it back then, sort of reminded me of the frame narrative from a lot of like 19th century novels. There's an editor who like supposedly discovers the manuscript, and so editors like obviously play a different function than authors do, but the novels kind of adopted them as an important role or function somehow. So I'm wondering if you can talk about like authors and editors and like working with real editors who convince you to write nonfiction, but also sort of playing this editor role to yourself a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, so much writing is self-editing. And now I spent some time in graduate school wondering about that device of I bought an old desk and then I opened the secret drawer and this manuscript came out. Like, why is that there? Why do we need that? And just now, I thought maybe that's a metaphor for somehow how when you're writing something that's going well or that gives you a point in, you almost feel like it's coming from the outside, that's almost what enables you to go into it. Because when I turned to this, I was writing a novel about like a Turkish American writer for a New Yorker like publication living in Istanbul in 2010, and that person, this may surprise you, but I was having some trouble separating that person from myself. And when I went back to this book, which I really did I didn't find it in a drawer, but like it was in it was in Google Drive, and I like downloaded it, and it was kind of like that, and I opened it, and I didn't recognize it. And something about, I realized too when I was rereading it, that part of the reason I hadn't been able to finish it the first time was that I'd still felt really embarrassed and like ashamed of all the dumb things that I did when I was 18, and that looking back at it, it felt more like another person. It felt like it didn't feel shameful anymore. It felt like a science experiment. Like, oh, if you had a certain person who had this background, who was put into this situation, isn't it interesting? This is what would happen. There wasn't anything to be ashamed of anymore, and it took a certain distance to achieve that. And I think the editor relationship, a lot of the power and the beauty of that is that there's only so far that you can get outside yourself. I mean, unless you have the luxury of waiting for 20 years, but like an editor is just someone who is like, you know, ideally you on the outside, who can look and see the thing from the outside and help you achieve that distance that you might not necessarily have. It's going to be a really beautiful thing.
Please.
I liked your analogy of the prefrontal cortex getting wired up. What else did you learn about yourself while you were writing the novel?
Did everybody hear that? Great.
So what else did I learn about myself while I was writing the novel, in addition to the fact that my prefrontal cortex was not fused until well into my mid-20s? I learned, well, the book that I'd been working on was called The Two Lives, and it was about someone who had this feeling of living two lives, oddly enough. So she was a nonfiction writer, and she felt that the nonfiction that she was writing was somehow missing something, that each piece was not connected to the one before, and that there was some larger human reality that was missing, so she was going to try to write this novel. And when I went back to this older manuscript, I realized that, I mean, the thing that really made me set aside The Two Lives and turn to this book that I then called The Idiot, I called it The Idiot because the parts in it that were valuable to me were kind of the parts about being lost and clueless, and precisely the things I was embarrassed about the first time around, like the second time around seemed to me to be the most valuable. That was one detour too many. I just lost my train of thought. Wait, what was I just saying? Oh, what did I learn about myself? I learned, so the thing that made me decide finally to set aside The Two Lives and go to this book that I called The Idiot for the reasons that made me forget what I was about to say. Oh my god, it just happened again. Oh, it was that I came to this sentence that said, it was like 100 pages in, it was like I began to feel that I was leading two lives, one consisting of my schoolwork and the other consisting of these emails with this guy, Ivan. And I thought, like, really? Like, already at age 18, when I was so innocent, I was already leading the two lives, and I was already trapped in some way between the public and the private, and that made me really interested, and then I could see so many parallels between this story and the one that I've been trying to write, and it seemed to me that the person who I was trying to write about was the person who was in this, like that's who she becomes, and she becomes that person, not just in the kind of, I don't know, trivial sense that they're both sort of like me, but in the more specific sense that it's the events in this book that made the person into the person who she is in the later book, and that I had to write this book first. And then that actually, I mean, it was kind of a nice feeling because it made me realize that this thing that I thought I had, you know, I had kind of written off that year and thought, oh, that was a time when I was exploring an avenue that turned out not to be the right avenue, but already it was the same thing was already happening, so I guess that was one thing I learned about myself.
Who else? What else? What else do we want to talk about?
There was one there with the headphones.
A few years ago, you wrote about American short stories, and you had certain reservations about them. And I was wondering if those concerns came up in writing this novel as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wrote like a really mean piece about short stories many years ago, and the occasion for writing that was N+1 magazine had asked me to write something about the contemporary American short story, and I was in the middle of studying for my this horrible exam that we had that was 1 hour long, and you had to know 3 national literatures, 100 years in 3 national literatures, and my years were 1830 to 1930, and the countries were England, Russia, and France. I was like, I don't know what's going on in the contemporary American short story. And they were like, no problem, we got you covered. They mailed me the best American short stories of 2003 and the best American short stories of 2004, and they were like, here you go. So I read those books, and I didn't care for them very much. So I was like, I just wrote what I thought was wrong with those books, and then that has kind of turned into this like polemic about the short story. But yeah, what I thought was, I did think about those things when I was writing. I did think about, I don't know, the main thing that I remember feeling, I wrote that piece a very long time ago, but I remember having a sense that the short story and the short stories I love, the short story is actually a quite specific form that's really good at doing a very particular thing and evoking a kind of melancholy. I don't think that's too specific. And that the stories that I was reading were kind of attempts to write a novel that were distilled in these tiny spaces, which I thought I had seen happen in my experience of, my limited experience of being in workshops in college, where of course you can't write a novel you can't write a whole novel in a semester, so every student has to write a short story, and they're burdening these short stories with things that the short story form was not. The short story is a very specific thing. It's not the case that every fiction writer is a good short story writer, or that every good fiction idea is going to be a good short story. And part of what I thought was that some of these short stories, if they had some more space to just wander a little and they weren't so forced to evoke so many details in such a condensed space, then they might be more pleasant to read. So when I wrote my book, I saw that it was over 400 pages, and I was like, I'm just going to go with it, and then no one can accuse me of having condensed too much. So yeah, so I did have that in mind.
Maybe one more, if anybody has anything they're dying to, yes, please.
I love the way you wrote Sagan's Turkish American Identity, and I liked it because it wasn't overly explained or overly politicized, and it allowed her to just exist as a person with parents from another background. And I was wondering if you did that intentionally or you thought about that a lot.
If I thought about her, Sagan's Turkish American Identity, and not over-explaining. I mean, I definitely did have the experience of, how can I say this without sounding like a total asshole? Like, I definitely did have the experience of reading books about the immigrant experience that did feel a little bit over-explained. So I guess I was, but you know, it's not even that. It's like, I think it's a matter of trusting readers, that the books that I like to read the most, they're all a little bit, all the great books are weird. They're written by weird people. Writers are weird people. The books are all a little bit weird. If you try to summarize any of the great novels, you start to sound like a crazy person, because they're all like, they all just have, you're like, why? So then Anna dies, and then there's like 100 pages about like agriculture. Like, it just doesn't make sense. But it's because like, I don't know, but writers have this thing that they want to express, and the ones who are the most moving are, to me, are the ones who aren't necessarily trying to, shoehorn that into some neat little like pellet, and they let you just, they give you a bunch of stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense, and people are meaning makers, so they're, people will make some story out of that, and I think people are I think readers are smarter than a lot of people give them credit for, and I would always sort of prefer to under-explain and write some weird stuff and let the reader draw the dots than go in the opposite direction and explain, over-explain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The obligatory, are you thinking about another novel?
Yeah, I'm thinking of 2 more novels.
I think it was right not to talk about our hair, actually.
Yeah, because we have to leave some mystery. Essential mystery
Plus, it
of
might
us.
be more entertaining to us than it would be many. I just have to say, thank you. It's a remarkable novel, and one of its many remarkable aspects for me was the fact that it is, to me anyway, almost exactly equal parts gravitas and humor, which is rare. And if we're going to reshelve the books
Oh,
in
that's
terms
a
of
good way to
the
do it.
sad books versus the funny books,
Yeah.
I'm honestly not sure which shelf.
Well,
I'd
all the
put-
best
I'd put
books
this
will
one.
be in
All the and there will be a set. There will be a category.
Yeah,
The shelf.
the Venn
Our
diagram.
favorite shelf will be books too good to categorize.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we have books by both authors that they'll be happy to sign for you. If you'd like one, you may grab one and pay for it upstairs. If you're interested in helping our fund for people in the process of deportation, you can find out about it on our website. Thank you very much.
Oh, go on.
FT, I got you set up back here.